Well, hello. Welcome to the third part of our webinar. I am your special guest speaker. I am Ms. D, and I'm here to talk to you about, as you know if you joined us previously, but if not, to talk about personal narratives and how it fits into history and pop culture, especially African American personal narrative and pop culture, the way it fits into the general American genre of pop culture. So today, let's take this opportunity to learn a bit more about personal narrative, what I think about it. So let's begin with a few focus questions, shall we? Let's start with question 1. What is considered the standard factual historical overview of personal narrative and its relevance? We could substitute importance to the African American community in the past. And so when we're dealing specifically with African American community, we could think of the slave writings, the pre-slave writings in Africa and the slave writings here in America, Aquiano, and we could also think of one of those writings by Newport Gardner in terms of music, and we could think of 12 Years a Slave. We have personal narratives that have been edited, some have been written originally, and so we could perhaps consider that as the origin in terms of African Americans. What has my research revealed about today's approach to personal narrative and the Black community? Well, blending that with thinking about what was going on in the past, one of the approaches today is to think as if ancient history was 1950, which we know it wasn't. For instance, when students do research, important research on the New Negro and the Harlem Renaissance, let's go back to Ellen Locke, to the New Negro, an interpretation that was edited and actually came out to the public in 1925 or so. And this is an article by James Weldon Johnson, Harlem, the Culture Capital. And I quote, "In the makeup of New York, Harlem is not merely a Negro colony or community. It is a city within a city, the greatest Negro city in the world. It is not a slum or a fringe. It is located in the heart of Manhattan and occupies one of the most beautiful and healthful sections of the city. It is not a, quote, quarter of dilapidated tenements, unquote, but is made up of new law apartments and handsome dwellings with well-paved and well-lit streets." End of the full quote. Today we think of Harlem basically as a dilapidated, rundown section of New York with gentrification, and we don't see the beauty of Harlem originally, nor the origins pre-inhabitation by African Americans. So doing that research is important. And I would like to also think of the impact of the web, okay, when we think of the Black community, because many more Black Americans are becoming digital citizens as opposed to digital tourists. We're occupying these spaces digitally. And so let's take a look at Richard A. Schwartz in Eyewitness History, the 1990s. This is part of his introduction. "Since its introduction to the public, the web has played an increasingly important role in the cultures not only of the United States and Canada, but of all the technologically advanced nations of the world. And in 1993, there were only 50 websites worldwide. By 2000, there were more than 50 million." And he's quoting Court and Oster. "And throughout the 1990s, the web transformed the ways in which people access information, conduct business, shared personal information, and otherwise interacted as members of society." And that's in the past. In 1990, many of you were not born yet who are in our freshman college classes, and so the realization that, yes, there was an internet culture before you were born is important, because we are still impacted by the usage of virtual spaces, especially now when we look at COVID-19 and the coronavirus pandemic. Question 3. What is needed to further our understanding about the complexities of personal narrative and its impact on the future of the African American community? Well, number one, the African American community is multi-layered, very complex. There are some things, dynamics that might be shared in general, but the jobs people occupy, the ways in which people express their creativity, and the ways in which people interact with others of color and those who are not of color. It's multifaceted, multi-dynamic. And in this 21st century, it's needful for us to realize that. We are not just one part of a statistic that focuses on negativity or one part that hyperpraises positivity. We're the broad spectrum in terms of our narratives and the way people bring them to the forefront, the way they're told, if we can tell them ourselves, our personal memories, and the ways in which our memories might change, or 3 or 4 other people corroborate what we say. And I'm thinking of a particular aesthetic, artistic way in which one of our musicians and filmmakers created an instant pop culture expression and fad, if you will, a sensation. And I'm thinking of Prince in particular, and his release of the song 1999. And quoting Nelson George in Post Soul Nation in his entry 1982, Nelson George states, October 27th, Prince releases the double album 1999, and for the first time since 1980, consents to do a series of interviews. Well, we all know that Prince is now deceased, and many people think that he was very, very mysterious or very quiet and unassuming and had disregard for the public later on in life. But that's not true. Prince, from the beginning, even though he was flamboyant, and if you read his autobiography, and there are several that are out, and if you read Nelson George's account of Prince and his life, Prince was always kind of the mysterious personality. But he had prescience, he had foresight. And when he issued 1999, I remember because I was on the dance floor at that time, and we were boogieing down and laughing at the joke, saying, oh my goodness, what if this song actually comes back? Well, when it faded out, we thought, well, you know. But when it came back at the change of the millennium, we realized the ways in which Prince's genius and the ways in which he saw how we as people, as African Americans, as musicians and artists and writers and researchers and people in general, and those who are engaged in pop culture, how we could actually impact the future while in the present utilizing the dynamics that we have today. So how can it impact the future? There are so many multifaceted ways. AI, for instance, ways in which we can create new technologies in general, from the mundane to that which is spectacular, ways in which we contribute every single day to the fabric globally of the world, not just in America. So that's the last question we have for today. Thank you for joining our webinar. Be strong, stay up. Remember, your personal story counts. You matter. You matter.